A very warm welcome to all the guests. Thank you for joining us today. And I would like to, introduce you all in one-liner terminologies. But then I would request you to connect your childhood as well as your current role and what makes you, believe in this thought. That why do you think that green economy and green career is the one to be transitioned into? So you will all have to build upon your own experiences. So I'll start with you, Shashi. Mr. L.S. Shashidhara, he's a professor at Ashoka University, and also he is the principal investigator and the head of education engagement at DRIIB, which is the special cell instituted under the Principal Scientific Advisor of India, Government of India. So he's wearing multiple hats and delivering multiple solutions to the communities and stakeholders. We have Carlos. He is joining us right from Switzerland, and he is a professor at EHL, which is a very well-known institution in Lausanne. We have Mr. Venki Raghavendra, who is in the US, but fortunately right now he is in India. So thank you, Venki, for joining us. Venki is the senior VP at Safe Water Network. That is an organization based in the US, and they are focused on creating solutions for communities for safer water access and better water access. And we have Mr. Tarun Bhargav, who has lived his life being CFO of various organizations, and the last stint being with Continuum Energy. And he is very much vested into the space of sustainability, and he's an alum of IIT Kanpur. So welcome you all once again. And now I would request you to please share your experiences and do a very quick roundup of why you think this is important. Thank you.
So do you want me to start or you say mention my name first? Yeah. Okay. So I'm start with as an introduction, as an educationist, I'm a biologist. And in the area of teaching, more focused on ecology and evolutionary biology teaching. Although, my own research is related to cancer biology and now mostly COVID-related work as, both in the lab as well as a public health phenomena, right? Because the pandemic is a public health problem. So in that context, I'll sort of take you through a couple of points very quickly, and then we can have more discussion and question and answer sessions. As a person who is involved in education and both are thinking about the curriculum, syllabi, and the pedagogical methods, and what is the purpose of education? What is, particularly in the context of higher education, what is that students would like to sort of gain from the education, and what is that society expect from higher education, right? So very often, from individual point of view, they're looking for jobs, right? Although a small percentage that may be going to higher education to fulfill certain kinds of passion, whether it is in medical education, engineering education, or science or other social science related education. Some people, or more large number of people, are actually, aspiring for jobs, right? It's all over the world. It's not very India specific. A small percentage are the ones who are actually want to gain something more and get into the deeper into a particular field. Now, in the context of climate change, in the context of unsustainable growth all over the world, in the context of rapid urbanization in India, right, which may be happening in other parts, but much more in India in the last 30, 40 years, large amount of it's unplanned. And the earlier we were talking about rural-urban divide is all sort of gone. And now we have urban-urban divide. We are talking about a variety of different problems the whole country is facing, our world is facing because of climate change, environmental degradation, deforestation, and so forth. And I think this world is moving, thinking at least a very concerted way, and there are summits, Paris Agreement, now Glasgow Agreement at Glasgow, that we need to do something about it. And we need to change the way we do our developmental program. Our economy itself should be green economy, as you mentioned. It's not anymore sustainable to have the current, rate of growth, our current model of growth, our development. So more and more jobs would be, would require certain sustainability skills or green economy related skills, in addition to have some domain knowledge. It could be medical devices, or it could be automobile industry, or it could be an IAS officer, as a district administrator, doesn't matter. So they need to have these skills. And my thinking personally, and hoping rather than thinking, wishful thinking, is perhaps it will be mandatory that every employee, right, of a large or small or large organization should have certain sustainability skills so that they become more and more carbon neutral. Individuals have to become carbon neutral. Every organization, whether it's a 50 employee organization or a 5,000 employee organization, should also become carbon neutral. And there would be more and more jobs with these kind of skills. So in a way, for individuals, it's more like a job prospects to have these skills. Society needs them, and hopefully there will be a convergence that education will also sort of start incorporating in these skills as part of the curriculum and syllabi, so that sustainability skills, understanding the climate justice to climate economy to green economy, I think hopefully there will be more such kind of requirement. That is one, from the mandatory, from the policy perspective. Second one is, as an individual, everybody should aspire for a better future, and their future is not as guaranteed as 20, 30, 40 years ago, when people would think about their future 5 years from now, 10 years from now. As you can see, 5 to 10 years is already becoming a longish enough time point to change the world towards worse rather than towards better. I think it's also for their own benefit. They need to learn some of these skills. I'll stop here.
Sure. Carlos, would you want to go next?
Yes, with pleasure. So my name is Carlos Martin Rios. As I said, I am an associate professor of management at the university, which basically means that I do teach and research and aspects pertaining to how to lead an organization, how to manage a team, but also how to being able to promote and lead a change in organizations, innovation, or also things that have to do with new technologies and stuff like that. So at this point, I have a big interest on the topic of sustainability. Sustainability, it can be perceived as two different things. And I think this is something that the students, they will probably understand very quickly. Sustainability can mean changing something on the way you do things. And this can be a for-profit company, but it can also be the government, it can be every individual in the house, your parents, yourself. So you do try and change a little bit your behaviors. You do try and change a little bit your practices. And this we usually define it as a more operational type of sustainability. But it can also be trying to rethink the way you basically behave as a company, as an individual, as a society. So for that, we call it more like a strategic sustainability. So it's more all-encompassing. So what we've seen here, and this is what the students that are listening will observe once they probably finish in the school and move into the workplace or universities or something like that. It's like there are many companies that they claim to be sustainable because they are trying to change a few things here and there, kind of those operational things, without challenging much the way they behave, they are. And we have still not that many organizations that they really rethinking the whole system. They're trying to build a transition toward a green company, green society. So in that sense, for them, it will be very important to understand that both approaches are good, but they will have plenty more opportunities to get a job, to start up their own companies, to promote change at the society level if they do have this mindset of sustainability, this more strategic approach to sustainability. And for that, they they are the generation that they will lead the change. And that's why it's so important, an event that is one that you're organizing and these many other events where we just trying to empower youth to understand that we need to go from little incremental change to a true systemic transition. So I think that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Great. Tarun?
Yeah, thank you so much, Gayatri. And it's a pleasure to be on this forum and share some of my views and experiences that I've gathered over the years with these students. So I would like to maybe touch upon, three aspects. One, when I started my career, this was in early 90s. And, I was looking at, what are the options which are there and, how I looked at and what happened. I'll probably share a couple of aspects from there. Second, having worked in, different corporates across sectors, retail, telecom, infrastructure, and of course, last 6.5 years have been associated with green energy and renewable energy. So what's the perspective from a corporation's perspective? And the third is, the context, which is about sustainability. It's about, green environment, climate change, and so many other things that we are talking about today. So first of all, I would say that when I started my, when I was completing my engineering, and when we were looking at careers, so early 90s, typically you would take careers which were traditional to your specialization, electrical engineering, mechanical, metallurgical, and so on and so forth. However, the IT companies started to visit the campus. It started somewhere in late 80s, but yeah, early 90s, obviously it was. And I still remember that, there was one of a very large, prominent IT company, an Indian IT company, which came to the campus for the first time. It was completely unknown and not many people would like to take that job. Okay. And I myself, for example, I was shortlisted after the written, test, but I did not go for the interview simply because I said, the salary that they are offering, it was like some 2,500 rupees per month at that point in time, which was, less than half of what I was desiring. And I said, this is not where I want to be. As things turned out, now people who had the least of grades, who were really typically at the bottom of pyramid in terms of the academics and who probably did not get job anywhere, were the people who landed up in that IT company. And we know, and the rest is history. The IT boom, of the 90s, the dot-com of 2000, and the last 2 decades, we have known where it is. So effectively, many of my batchmates, effectively, one, they did pretty well in the sector. They were leading and they held responsible position. But more importantly, they became millionaires because they had stock options. So I think, so that's really, the IT boom of the 90s and 2000s led to so many careers, and now it is in a different phase altogether. Similarly for telecom in the early 2000s, retail in India in the 2000s, in the last, 2 decades. So there have been those, what should I say, the trends, the opportunities which different sectors, offer, as career choices. And clearly we can see that, the impact of climate change and the growing awareness or consciousness, towards environment, towards sustainability, is leading all types of companies, all sizes of companies, companies across geographies to focus on environment and sustainability. So therefore, over the next, 2 decades, and of course, the rest of the century, we can definitely see that, the focus on sustainability and environment related, careers are going to be pretty much, pretty much offer, tremendous sort of opportunities. Just to give some numbers, the total spending on climate, what they call as climate finance, was just about $600 odd billion in 2019-20. If we were to reach to 1.5 degrees, if we want to limit the global temperature rise to 1.5 or even 2 degrees, as per the Paris Accord, we would need to scale up that 600 billion to something like 3.5 trillion rupees on an average during 2001 to 30 itself. And that has to increase further to something like $4.5 to $5 trillion, over the next decade. So what we are talking of is tons of money literally is going to pour in towards various activities, various actions, and we don't even know today, what are the different types of, activities which needs to get done, either from technology or on the ground, or towards people, towards cities. We don't even know today, what are the different aspects which would emerge, which would lead to, different businesses and therefore career opportunities. So I think my view is that this area, offers some tremendous amount of opportunities. But having said so, my personal, view is that while we are talking of sustainability in general, green skills, green job in general, everybody needs to have certain domain skill or experience and expertise.
Absolutely.
It could be engineering, it could be architecture, it could be, different things, but these will have to get applied to those specific, areas which would develop over a period of time. So that's the second part which I'd like to delve. The third aspect, now let's look from a company's perspective. Businesses are here to make profits, fundamentally. That's really the premise of, any business. And and basically profits and therefore increasing shareholder value. Now, until at the start of my career, environment responsibility was pretty much a tick box. In the sense there were laws which would make sure that you don't have to, you have to treat your pollutants, and you have to take care of health and safety. So it was essentially HSE was really the buzzword, and it was more like it was relegated to a peripheral activity within the organization.
Compliance, actually. So it was more like a tick box. Okay, I have done this, so that is why I should not be penalized.
Exactly. And nobody, and it was certainly not the job or a role that anybody would like to do. In fact, the underperformers in organization will be relegated to jobs which is related to environment, safety, and health. Nobody would really care. Okay. Because your focus is on products, services, markets, consumers, and make profits. This is not something, which we want to do as companies. But I think I can clearly see the last, 5 to 10 years, the growing focus in companies to be very, very focused on, environment and, sustainability. So for example, my MBA batchmates, there are a few of them, handful of them working at very senior positions in banks and corporates who are head of CSR. And it's a very proud and a very important role that they are performing, in terms of the CSR activities, which we would have never thought. I would never want to be a CSR person, 10 years ago.
We will come to that, Tarun, since CSR is a different altogether. So here we are focused more on climate action. But anyway, CSR also we will talk about, because CSR could be a channel through which we can, root certain.
So the idea is, I was just mentioning about the career options. Yes. So now effectively the companies, now the focus on sustainable goals, the focus on environment is now the mainstream. It is probably the number one agenda of the corporations. And therefore, anything that you choose around, around the, sustainability aspect is going to be the number one focus of companies and governments and society at large. And therefore, huge amount of career prospects is what I see.
Right.
So, I mean, I'll pause here and probably we can take up more questions as the discussion progresses. Thank you.
Yeah, would request Venki to share his thoughts before we move on to the questions from students as well as my questions.
Thank you, Gayatri. It's such a delight to be here along with the wonderful panelists, Mr. Shashidhara, Mr. Carlos, and Tarunji. And I've had the joy of working closely with Ashoka University. I engage with the hospitality industry in a variety of ways. And Gayatri, I must really applaud India MUN, and I'm so honored to be a part of this. And all the effort that all of you have been putting to really galvanize and really bring together students from all over the country and challenge everybody's thinking. I think that's phenomenal because there is a huge dearth of these kind of platforms to engage in this discussion. And based on my limited knowledge, I can say this is the first of its kind. I'm going to go off the script here, Gayatri, with your permission and with my fellow panelists' permission. I'm going to go off the script. I had done my research, I had written my notes, but I think my fellow panelists have raised some good points. I'm going to share a little 2 minutes, a little personal story. When I was 17, and Tarun, you mentioned about early 90s and you started your career. Mine was slightly before that. I went off the traditional path and took up a green job and created a green job for myself. And I didn't even know it was a green job. I, with 2-3 other friends, started a one of its kind community-centered ecotourism initiatives. And I'm going on record here for the next 12 to 13 years. Next 12 to 13 years, what was probably my best earning years in some ways, my best career building years in some ways, from when I was 17 to 29, I worked. I didn't get a single paycheck. I worked to build this amazing ecotourism organization, an experiential education organization where we took young people, professionals, IT people. The IT boom was happening in Bangalore, and everyone into the outdoors, really brought them close to nature and really helped them appreciate and admire nature. And that was my career. And what I learned and what I gained in those 12, 13 years has been the best part of my life. And the organization that I co-founded still stands tall today after 35 years and is engaging hundreds and thousands of people in green initiatives across the Western Ghats of Karnataka. And I say that because, I was doing some research. Today, almost every job, every career needs a sustainability and a green mindset and a green skill. But more than the traditional skills, I feel that, really challenging yourself, really the intangible, the risk-taking, a bit heart into it is what is the need of the hour. We can all the things that we want. We need frameworks, we need rules, we need this. Young student listening here, if your heart is not in it, it's really with challenges, especially as field is taking off.
Your voice is breaking, Venki.
We need to be pragmatic. We need to be practical.
Maybe he can switch off his video.
Yeah. So I think for shortly, and I'll switch it on again. I think that challenging yourself, that risk-taking ability, and we know that oh, sorry, I think I lost you all for a few seconds. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So all I'm saying is the risk-taking ability and the ability to challenge yourself and really choose the career in with that mindset, I think is more important. Subsequently, I have been a part of the National Skills Development Council. I train people in social entrepreneurship. I train people in careers. I write a career column, and I've talked about all these topics. But I think unless that inner fire and that passion to really pursue something green and so on is not there, it's going to be tough. And lastly, I am very, very inspired myself by a lot of the young people I see who are actually leading the way. they are our role models. They are finding their green paths and showing that it is possible to do that. So happy to engage in a discussion later, but I just wanted to share those thoughts. Thank you, Gayatri.
All right, so I'll come to the main question here, and this is more addressed to the students also, because there is a lot of peer pressure. So the best time for the person to form their identity and to form their goals and aspirations in life is the formative years, and that is the segment that is sitting here right across. So grade 8 to grade 12 is very important in terms of defining who are we and who we want to be and who are our role models. And there is tremendous peer pressure and some idol worship is there. I mean, what kind of people you want to be like. I remember when about a few years back, about I think a decade back almost, there was somebody who really used to worship Vijay Mallya and say that, okay, I want to be somebody like him because he's so rich and he's having everything in life that one wants to have. But then over the course of years, people saw that decline, right? So here it is very important for us to understand and also to somewhere, connect with that stage of life these students are in, and then talk about how the transition and how can that be brought in a very systematic manner. Professor Shashidhar, I would request you to share your thoughts on this.
No, I understand that. In fact, that's one of the reasons we cannot separate individual aspirations in conferring these educational skills and also projecting very different career opportunities, right? In fact, what Tarun explained, I think that's a kind of approach, right? Finally, everybody wants to be successful in their own way. How do you define success? Each individual sort of defines in a particular way, and some people may define in terms of what kind of salary they get, some people may get what kind of contribution they have made to the society. Now, one is to change the vocabulary of the young people. Now, that has to come from young people themselves. And also, it's not enough it comes from the young people. It also has to come from the policy people, educationists, and other career professionals and organization. It could be Infosys, or it could be Tata's, or Ambani's or Adani's, other type of work, whether it is energy related, automobile related, wherever, Mahindra's. They should change the vocabulary, and everybody should start talking about green economy. And they should start, actually, even today itself, if they start, let's say, every year there's a placement fair, it happens in all major organizations, whether IITs or major engineering colleges or other, universities. And they should start asking those questions right away at the time of appointment, right? And say that, what is that you think 5 years from now, what kind of skills would be required? Would you be ready to acquire those skills? Do you already have those skills, or would you be ready to acquire those skills now, over the next 5 years through some self-learning methodology? And that the peer interaction will immediately percolate among the young people. They would be looking at, perhaps next year, unless we have these skills, our job prospect may not be that good. I'm talking about very, very practical way of, looking at, the jobs anywhere in the world, particularly so-called in India, because so-called in medium income countries like India, because we cannot separate job aspirations of a very large section of the people who are still moving from lower middle class to upper middle class kind of a transition. And we cannot, simply say that let's start with very high values, which, may not be practical. The second is, thankfully, the new education policy talks a lot about sustainability and green economy and, Gandhian economy. In the way I look at it, is actually Gandhian economy is already being, explored, that we should incorporate some of those topics in the curriculum, right? And there should be more focus on self-learning ability rather than spoon-feeding certain topics, and whether it be physics or chemistry or social sciences, because the knowledge is right now available digitally everywhere. Let students learn how to learn on their own, assuming that, of course, they know how to filter the so-called, reliable knowledge in the vast, digital resources that are available on the cloud, right? Once some of those elements are also incorporated part of national education policy in India, and if the organizations, particularly both government and the private companies, start asking some of those questions during the interviews and incorporate during the written test for job recruitment and such kind of things will start changing. And as you said, the peer pressure, peer interaction is all looking at what is that they want to do 5 years from now. But the 5 years from now, what may happen if those indications or signals start coming now, as today itself, they will very quickly prepare themselves. I mean, I want to give you one example very quickly and then close. This pandemic has given us an understanding of what a society can do together. Young people can do together, right? I'll just give you one example, one particular sector, which is the diagnostic sector. When RT-PCR based diagnostic was the only way to identify, even today, to identify early detection of the COVID infection, SARS-CoV-2, there were only 2 labs, one in Delhi and one in Pune, right? Now we have more than 10,000 labs, right? And the number of people got trained overnight doing so-called, RT-PCR even today in research is considered high-end technology. For diagnostic is a cutting-edge technology, right? Although RT-PCR as a technology is 10-year-old in the laboratories, for diagnostic purposes started only about 5-6 years old. Mostly in Western countries. In India, it was still very at primitive level. Only a few labs were doing RT-PCR based diagnostic for other diseases. But now, throughout the country, even small districts and towns, we have these RT-PCR based diagnostic is being done. And you can walk in and get tests done for about 500 rupees, and results will come in 8 to 10 hours, right? And you ask all the people who are coming from US right now, how much they had to find difficulties for them to get an RT-PCR test done in US or in Europe. It takes, to get an appointment takes 24 to 48 hours. The results will take more than 24 hours. You have to pay more than $100 to get tests done, right? And all of these things, because hundreds and hundreds of young people, PhD students, undergraduate students actually contributed. When ISA Pune was basically, starting a testing center and training people, every one of them is actually an undergraduate or a postgraduate student. It's not scientists who are actually doing all this diagnostic testing, except in few places where there are professionals doing it. Out of 10,000, I can say 8,000 testing centers in the country are run by actually undergraduate or postgraduate students in colleges and universities.
It's a very good example. And I like the fact that you spoke about the vocabulary. And I would also want to qualify that as the trend setting among the young people. So I remember yesterday, Satya Tripathi, the former Assistant Secretary General of United Nations Environment Program, during his speech, he did mention about the new vogue that people now want to wear reused clothes, the young people especially, and they take a lot of pride in wearing the reused clothes. So this is the kind of mindset shift that probably we need to bring in. So vocabulary and trend setting is very important. So all the young people who are listening to us, you have to understand and first of all identify all the areas where your trend setting will add a lot of value, right? So the way tattered jeans, like when I was a young child, tattered jeans was never a fashion option, but now it is very much a fashion option. So this is just a way we think about these things. Just having the choices, even consuming less could be actually a very trendy choice. And you guys can, build upon that. Going vegan can be a very trendy choice, and you can build upon that. So of course, trend setting is something that the young people can do, and the generations that are going to follow will always look up to that. So that's one. And now coming to the second question, and that I would probably ask you, Carlos. The sustainability and climate action related research, especially in the domains that you are focused on, and you are looking at management, I know, so you must be interacting with all sorts of students. So at an international level, what kind of directions are students mostly taking up when it comes to their career choices?
Good question and difficult answer. I would say there are basically three probably main approaches today on how students pursue their personal careers. First of all, a big change we've observed over the last, I would say maybe 5 to 10 years. 10 would be a little bit too much, but probably the last 5 years, is that students, even before they graduate, they start doing some research on the type of companies they would like to work for. And what we've been observing is that there are some companies that in the past would be quite interesting for students to get jobs on, that today are not so much anymore. And the main reason why is because the students do have kind of an understanding of different practices that these companies are doing, how they're behaving, how they are respecting or not their employees, and fair conditions and environmental practices. And then they say, the company might be okay, I might get a good salary if I join in, but I don't feel like working for this type of company. And this is something that we've been observing very much, for example, in the United States, and is now spreading here into Europe, that younger people, for example, do not want to work in settings, for example, like restaurants or many hotels. And the reason why is because the work practices and the work conditions are not good. The environmental footprint of many of these companies is extremely high, and it brings a lot of, say, I wouldn't say bad, but it doesn't bring good reputation to students to work for this type of companies. So that's number one, being extremely more conscious about where they want to work. And the second interesting trend we are also observing is this explosion on jobs that are in the area of sustainability. So, for example, in Europe, about 5 to 10 years ago, there were only a handful of postgraduate programs on sustainability management. Most of them were in the area of environmental studies, kind of, I would say, on the hard science fields, food science and medicine, things that have to do with geography and areas of engineering and how to improve systems and practices. Over the last few years, we've seen a huge interest on the student side on learning more about how to manage companies, how to work in areas like marketing, like human resources, like even like sustainability itself, measurement, accreditations, changing practices. And there are quite a good amount of postgraduate degrees out there. There are also other, not just in Europe, you can see that this is a trending topic in Singapore, and you see this in Hong Kong, you see all around the world, actually. Top universities, they want to deliver postgraduate education on things that have to do with sustainability and change. And finally, the third big trend that I see is the most promising, also is always very promising in a way, is the students who want to be part of the change journey, and they come out with entrepreneurial ideas to start up their own companies. Areas that I see that I'm extremely that thriving in terms of the number of ideas and new projects launched by students. You can think, for example, food, the food value chain must be addressed, and there are so many things that we need to do better, and they can be do better. So young people come with a different mindset. about manufactured food, about distribution of food, about, you mentioned before, about the idea of becoming vegan, or closer to the idea of a more friendly diet and healthier diet as well. So in that neighborhood, there are plenty of ideas. Tourism is another area where you can observe younger people launching their own companies, not just not only saying running your own hotel or things like that, but for example, there is a wonderful transformation of the relationship between technology and services, and tourism is one of them. How technology can contribute to make the service experience more sustainable, friendlier with the environment, thinking about the long-term perspective, not just the short-term profitability. So with this, I want to finish and to say something that I believe there is a lot of misunderstanding on everyone's. People, for the most part, tend to think that sustainability is expensive. Doing things sustainably means losing money, that companies are just unable to, the only way they can make a living is by focusing on the short-term profitability, and profits means not caring about the environment, not caring, and we see this almost like a confrontation. So it's either we do the way we know how to do things, we continue that way, or we go into the unknown where nobody really knows where profits will come from, and this dichotomy is not the correct one. Actually, what we've seen is that there are more and more small companies, but also some of the biggest ones, they are transforming the way they do business. It doesn't mean that they don't want to do business. We want them to do business, but we want them to do them differently, in a way that it is more balanced. The reality of how you deal with the environment, you deal with people, and you care about not only the short term, but also the long term financial benefits. And young people, they have probably a clearer mindset about this transformation than some more mature people in more mature companies.
Okay, great. So I'll just take the next question for you, Tarun, because we are very short of time. So
Yeah.
just wanted to check, climate finance is one area where there is huge scope of pushing this entire field upwards, right? Because that is the only hitch. And when Shashi was talking about the the economy of a country like India, the prevalence of aspirational careers and careers that are really going to give you better options in terms of pay packages, and so green skills, which will be more, I would say, remunerative in nature, that will always be in vogue. So for a situation like this, where we cannot totally make it a hypothetical situation where everybody aspires to do something good for the planet and just forget about their individual needs. So how do you think climate finance can help push this agenda forward? And what kind of interventions do you see are already existing to make it happen?
Okay. Once the money flows, okay, it's a chicken and egg situation. That if there are ideas, if there is a purpose, there are ideas, there is a concrete action plan, then you would get the money. I'm just saying, theoretically speaking, right? Having said so, the point is that because there is, tons of capital which has to be repurposed, because there is money which is lying in equities and all kinds of instruments across the globe. Now that has to get rechannelized and repurposed for things which are linked to sustainability, right? In general. Now, if that happens, and then once you have ideas, business propositions, then the funding is going to come. Now, how it is going to come? It's banks, it's investors, it's individuals, it's corporations. There are different ways. It's like it's an ocean, things would happen. So if there are people, and I would really say that the youngsters of today, I mean, you look at the startups, people are in their 20s and 30s who have some great ideas and great thoughts. So I think these innovations and new ideas and trying to do something, trying to make a difference in their own sphere, whether it is geography or in their own landscape, I think that's where the capital is going to come. Okay, is what I would say. So therefore, it's not about just doing jobs, because the work which has to be done is mammoth. Just about 100 corporations or 100 governments can't do it. I mean, there have to be hundreds of thousands of people who are doing things individually with their ideas, which is going to make it happen. So therefore, the opportunities in terms of, or rather, the channelizing of finances is going to certainly happen on various initiatives, is what I would say. And therefore that entrepreneurial streak amongst people, would be very, very helpful.
So on that entrepreneurial streak, I would like to take the discussion to you, Venki. So when it comes to, you have, you were saying just some time back that you have spent close to 13, 14 years pursuing your passion. And then you got into something which you are, which is rewarding as well as a passion project as well. So for the youngsters, what kind of options would you like to just give some examples where they think they can build a career in while really doing good for the planet as well as themselves?
Thank you, Gayatri. Again, I have to talk about my current project and the organization Safe Water Network. I mentioned that because even yesterday there was a big article in the New York Times, and of course it's been headlines here. Every day, 2 lakh water connections are happening in the country on a daily basis. There is the mission called the Har Ghar Jal mission, and the government wants to bring a tap in every home. I work closely with the Jal Shakti Ministry. I mentioned that because, just imagine the number of skilled people and experts and competent people needed just in the area of clean water. Water is as green as it gets in terms of green careers. So I use that example because there's a huge dearth of people working in the area of water and access to water and clean water and safe water. And you have an amazing conducive policy environment. The government wants to, and there's a $85 billion investment happening in the country. And I'm using a very real example and a very current example of how, water is just one of the biggest areas of green careers and green skills and sustainability, right? If we can look at every space like that, energy, right? Energy is another area where, again, we see, we know Mr. Tarun comes from the renewable energy background and so on. So, renewable energy is such an exploding area, right? So I was just researching earlier, you can take any industry, the whole procurement process can be green, the whole policy framing can be green. The whole area of the ecosystem management of that particular industry can go green. So in other words, as my other esteemed panelists mentioned, the mainstreaming of green careers is what is happening as we speak. So no matter which industry you go to, there's a very clear green and sustainable dimension to it, not just because it's fashionable, but because it's a real imperative need right now. And so just to highlight again, my own field that I'm working in, water, is probably one of the most important areas where we need young people coming into that space. I hope that answers your question, guys.
Sure. And now I think we should take some questions which are already there in the chat box. I'll go in the reverse order. So Pratiksha she's asking, a lot of companies today are producing things that are more green and eco-friendly, but due to lack of awareness, this reaches to not as many people. A huge part of India is yet to realize how crucial and important sustainability is. That's so right. What are the companies doing in terms of spreading such messages and educating these people? If your question is about which companies are doing this, I would like to direct you towards Buzz on Earth, because this is exactly what Buzz on Earth is trying to do. Buzz on Earth is trying to spread, and the term that Venki uses, the mainstreaming word, is actually the tagline of Buzz on Earth, mainstreaming sustainability, because that is what they intend to do, to connect people and educate them on these various options and stories and innovations and whatever is happening in this world. So that is the go-to place for you, if that's your question. But if you're asking what companies are doing to do this, that maybe I would request one of the panelists to answer. Otherwise, I'll be happy to.
I mean, we can only say that companies are not doing enough because if it's not so well known and and it's not mainstreamed yet, I think they're not doing enough. I think they should use more marketing.
That's a very honest answer, Shashi, and that's the fact, Pratiksha, that we are actually getting more and more companies understand the sensitivity of this issue. So they have to be partnering with organizations like Buzz on Earth or any such student bodies. Maybe you can create some sort of trust, or like when I was a child, I had a student group within my school, and we used to educate people on these matters, and we used to go and teach to students who were underprivileged. So these are the things that you can do at your level also, or try and route it to the organizations that you think can be of help.
Maybe I'd just like to add, I think what Professor Shashidharan said, I mean, I agree. Yeah. It is still not mainstream because today the pressure on profitability, especially the listed entities, is phenomenal. And therefore, to earmark, so I think the way to see this is, I'll give an equivalent. See, advertising and marketing is an expenditure, in your profit and loss account. But, companies, they treat this as an investment. Similarly, I think, because at the end of the day, you're building a brand, right? You're building awareness and popularity, whatever. I think similarly, the companies need to see the expenditure on sustainability, expenditure on spreading awareness, expenditure, related to anything around sustainability, which is an expenditure. They should actually see this as an investment for making the earth, our planet, a better place to live in. Not just their company, but in general, the planet as a whole. I think that orientation needs to come, and it's going to happen.
Yeah, great. That is to be done, and that is exactly what we're trying to achieve through mainstreaming sustainability initiatives.
I think, can I add a point, particularly, yes. What Tarun made is a really valid point.
Yeah.
If you look at large number of people are still thinking that let's exhaust our current market with whatever the technology we already have, sell that. And whenever it becomes, like government makes, let's say, you have to, let's say ban all these products and we have to move towards another technology, they assume that there'll be a big technology which will change the current way of living, and we'll start becoming the, producers and sellers of the new technology. I think that kind of, planning of an industry or an organization, even the government, how do you do import and export, that thinking has to change, right? Because that technology is going to be equally energy dependent. It's not simply about you whether use, fossil fuel versus the renewable energy. Our consumption of energy itself has to come down. The second law of thermodynamics clearly says, right? We are not the laws of thermodynamics. We are not anywhere close to, a carbon neutral or green economy unless we reduce our dependence on energy, right? And that has to come when you have decentralized technology, and we use smaller technology rather than big technology, which basically spreads the entire world. And that's the thinking has to start. And otherwise, no one will sort of going to invest in local solutions. Otherwise, everybody thinks there will be one global solution to the problem.
Okay, there's another question from Syed Rayaz. Green economy plays great role in development, but use of chemical sprays and pesticides, weedicides have dangerous consequences on nature and sustainability. How to curb such dangerous practices? Okay, that's a little digressed question, but happy to answer that. We can actually go for nature-based solutions and nature-based growing methods when it comes to avoiding the use of sprays and pesticides and weedicides. So that can be done, especially when if at all you're talking about the plantations and agriculture in specific. And there is an entire movement within India. It is called chemical-free living. So you should always look at ways to avoid chemicals in whichever way you can, right? And first thing, students, it has to start from your own eating habits. So how much junk are you eating? That should stop first thing. And then you should see what all ways you can reduce the chemical induction in your own life, and then, move forward towards that.
Gayatri, I'd just like to add that since he
Yes.
used the word curb, I think the government, and I think again there is a movement, people need to go and, that the government need to bring in regulations and laws which then prohibit such use, manufacture, imports, etc. But then, of course, I mean, there is nothing to beat what you said, the awareness and everybody, starting this practice.
Absolutely, yeah. And somebody is asking that these meetings available in YouTube. Yes, you can actually subscribe to India MUN YouTube channel or Buzz on Earth YouTube channel, and these videos will be uploaded there. Okay, next question is about advance in technology has led to production of, that one we have taken already, right? Or we have not? Yeah, no, we have not taken this. Advance in technology has led to production of enormous pollutants, and there are very less methods to curb them. What are the methods to curb such problems? Well, Syed, this is the question that you could have asked in the previous session, but still would love to keep it open for the panelists here. Would anyone want to address that?
Gayatri, it's a very broad answer, but it's true of any of these things. It's about awareness. It's about behavior change. It's about habit developing and so on in at all levels, right? It could be at the community level. It could be at the policy level. It could be in the industries and so on. So it is a multi-pronged effort, but ultimately it's about human action. So how do we change human action? How do we change human behavior? I think that's what it boils down to when it comes to the kind of problem areas that Syed has raised, both this and the earlier one.
Yeah, and I see there's one more interesting point made by Tanishi Nemani. She's saying stopping the production of junk food in factories will probably be bad for India's economy. So why would you think like that, Tanishi? Can you unmute yourself and explain? You cannot unmute? Okay, let me try doing. Wait. Allow to talk. Yeah. Now you can?
Yeah, I can unmute.
Okay.
It will be bad for India's economy because so many people buy the junk food, chips and chocolates, and even though the plastic that it is packaged in is bad, we can maybe find just another packaging for it, maybe not stop the production of the junk food altogether. Or we can find different recipes that might work for the same
Absolutely.
food items so that it'll be less harmful for the environment.
Yeah, very good point, Anishi. And I want to take a stab at that. And you all are welcome to actually add to this. So we were in discussions with the CEO of Nestle last month itself, and this was exactly the point that we raised to them, that Nestle is producing so many things which are kind of in the category of junk. So how would you justify that? Especially, how do you justify your sustainability policies and objectives if you're still continuing to produce such things? And we were told that now they are shifting towards producing healthy, snackable items. So I would say it is healthy junk, because junk is still junk, but then you can make it a little less bad, if not better. So yeah, that is one way to look at it. Packaging, of course, can be improved. There could be ways to, package it in more sustainable ways. And sustainable packaging is one big area. And I would strongly encourage, students listening to us to identify these smaller areas where you can have a big impact, right? Over to the panel, because I couldn't resist sharing the Nestle example, so I took it over.
I mean, I know there are a lot of innovations happening. I mean, junk food is only a relative terminology, what you call it junk food. Finally, at some point, anything beyond certain calories that we eat becomes junk food, right? It's, I think, overeating or eating any other kind, also junk food. I think what she meant was the sort of packaged snacks kind of a thing, which is generally come under junk food category. But I think it could be chocolate pastry, freshly out of oven could be junk food. What we need to look at is again, junk food is basically a trend, right? It was not that there was a need and the Nestle or anybody started, or Coke people. It's basically a fashion statement. Many times it's a trend setting. So it can also initiate trend setting. Even Nestle itself can take the initiative. There are lots of interesting, small places which are already doing it. Like, for example, you can take millet and make certain kinds of, without oil, without much of the other type of ingredients, which basically is so-called harmful for people who are sensitive to diabetes or hypertension. You can make these snacks, and where the snacks come with certain kinds of spoons or fork, which are edible, made up of millets, right? Not only you eat, and then you eat the spoon itself along with it. There's nothing to throw there, except, of course, the outermost cover, layer of protection. It could be paper bag or something. Otherwise, everything can be eaten up. So that's a lot of interesting innovation happening. This awareness has to spread, and people start using it. Then only, of course, it becomes sustainable for them to make in large quantity and market it.
Anyone else?
I can add.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Carlos.
Oh, sorry. No, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to quickly say that the valid point and wonderful point that Tanishi raised, it just brings to the fore that, look, all these situations are going to be fraught with what will be seeming contradictions, right? Is doing one thing good will become bad for something else, right? We experience these dilemmas on a daily basis. How do we take a balanced view? How do we take a empathetic view of these things? And how do we keep all the competing needs in perspective and do the right thing? That's a daily dilemma. And I think, all the young people listening there, you are actually solving that and tackling that much better than us adults, if I can put it that way. So we are going to be confronting these dilemmas of, seemingly contradictory needs and demands on a daily basis, right? Should I go in a car, or should I take the metro, or should I go in a bike, or should I take the bicycle when I'm likely to be hit by a car, right? So these contradictions are there, but I think it's all about how do you deal with those contradictions. Thank you, Carlos. Over.
Thank you. I wanted to add, because we do have here in Lausanne, as part of our research center, several projects on food, and I think what the student was asking, it is at the base of many people's concerns about, okay, so it's a trade-off. I'm winning here, then I'm losing there. If we change the way we do things, we walk into the unforeseen and what is going to happen. And we do have several projects on food. Actually, we've been arguing with Nestle many times, because our university and Nestle are both in Switzerland, so we're neighbors, and we collaborate in some projects. To all the students out there, you need to think about a couple of things. First of all, 40 years ago, there were not junk food. And the food that we could call today junk food was not manufactured. Like maybe our grandparents would try to do home something if they have access to chocolate, to do prepared chocolate, but you couldn't buy chocolate in the store the way we do so today. It's only been 40, 50 years, and it's been something that has become manufactured and industrialized. It will not take us another 50 years to change that. It's not a big deal. You will not lose jobs. What we will do is to do things differently. And the jobs will go from one place to another. And for that, we can also think about all this research that is nowadays we're working on. And it is under the umbrella, we call it, of the true cost of. So you can say the true cost of food, you can say the true cost of clothing or whatever you want. And this research, what it's trying to find out is the difference between price and cost. So if you buy, say, when we follow the example of junk food or manufactured food, if you buy some frozen food from Nestlé, we know today that it's cheaper to buy it, to acquire it, than if we want to prepare that meal at home. So in terms of cost, it makes sense to buy this kind of junk food. But in terms of the true value, in terms of health, in terms of transportation, everything, we know that that kind of food is extremely expensive. It's expensive for the health of the people eating it. It's expensive for how we manufacture it. So there is already a little bit of regulation, and there will be more. And these students, you will see this quite often. For example, a few countries today are already putting big taxes on soda and soda drinks like Coca-Cola or these type of ones, because we do understand that they are cheap to buy, but are quite expensive for your kids' health, for the kids' well-being. So we are going to see more and more of these changes. And what will happen is not probably the Coca-Cola will disappear. And if it does, it's too bad. Another company will come and join in. But most probably Coca-Cola will be forced to change the way they deliver soda and to deliver something that is healthier and that is not taxed. And then it is again competitive. So the forces of market are good here for making who wins and who loses. Now what we kind of changing are the rules. And it's not just about selling a lot and cheap with only thinking in cost, but it's also about, okay, what kind of value you bringing into consumers. And if you only selling and you're not doing any good, you should be taxed, you should be paying more, or you should deliver something else. And we are going to see this trend changing quite quickly in the next few years, I can say.
Yeah,
thank you.
Absolutely. No, so this is a very good point that you made, Carlos. So Tanishi, so just to look at the markets, how does market respond to a problem like this? So one is that the good behavior has to be rewarded and bad behavior has to be penalized, right? So when it comes to corporations and organizations like Nestle, PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, all of these who are deliberately producing, items which are neither good for the planet nor good for the consumers, that is you, they have to really, take charge of their actions, and they have to be penalized for doing this. And also they have to be, changing their course. They have to course correct over time. They have to change the way they are looking at these things. And they will have to, for example, PepsiCo, I know for sure, like Miss Indra Nooyi, even during her in her tenure, she was trying to introduce new, line items within PepsiCo, which are more health friendly and eco-friendly. So, and PepsiCo focuses a lot on, say, water related projects, because they know that they are really taking too much of water from the ecosystem, so they have to give it back. But then it is never a correct balance. The more you do, the better you can manage, but it is never even. So best thing is to actually start off a project or a business which is more eco-friendly from the roots itself. So with that, I would request all the panelists to, if they have any concluding remarks, do share. And we would like to thank all the students and the panelists once again.
So I want to, the last question.
Yeah.
What are your views for the future? What is your idea of an ideal future?
Oh yeah, I missed that one. Yes.
Yeah, in fact, that's going to be my, sort of a concluding remarks for this particular session. It's very interesting question. What is future? Can we actually predict future?
Mm-hmm.
Very often we plan things don't go well. Starting with early, since the independence, we had, what kind of 5-year plans the Planning Commission used to come out with, and how many of those plans actually converted into reality, right? There's always this question. They used to do feedback, and many times because of the war, because of the famine, because of all kinds of problems, things don't go well, right? Now, in the current world, what we see, every year is different from the previous year, and change is, of course, is permanent, right? Everybody knows about it. But the rate of change in the last 30, 40 years is phenomenal. No one can predict what will the future like, right? For example, when, in the 90s, early 90s, or even mid 90s, these jobs like, call center jobs was considered very fancy jobs, and everybody was aspiring for a call center job, right? But today, the hardly any call center job. AI and ML have taken over. There basically every problem of customers or clients is taken care of by automated call centers rather than human run call centers. So we cannot even predict what would be 5 years from now based on what may be happening today. And particularly because of the pandemic, many things happened. When nothing was planned, for this pandemic, although it was it was knocking at the door. There are large number of articles, policy documents, WHO articles, how to be prepared for the next pandemic, 2004, 2006. In fact, if you look at it, very, very prescient. In fact, every one of these things were already mentioned because everybody knew that a pandemic, it has to be something, a viral disease. It can't be a bacterial one because of the way it transmits itself, right? And the globally connected world changes even much faster. And because of the mobility, that the pandemic, spread much faster than, so there was no time to prepare. In fact, WHO was very clearly mentioning that we will not have time to prepare ourselves for public health because the disease will spread overnight because of the globally connected world, increased mobility, right? And that's precisely how we are facing now. Omicron, forget about the original, the Alpha variant. The Omicron variant, within next day from South Africa, it's already there in 100 different countries, and it is spreading like anything. So because the future is unpredictable, the only way we can plan for the future, right, is developing ability to solve the problem in a sustainable way, right? Problem solving ability and self-learning ability is the most critical for young students and young people, because that's the only key thing which will be useful in future. It's not their AI and ML skills. It's not their, whether it's the driving skills or developing some technology for food or for metro, doesn't matter. Finally, you need to learn quickly and you need to identify innovative solutions, and those solutions has to be sustainable. And those three skills are required.
Students actually want to ask questions further. So with your permission, may I let them ask? Chinmay, you wanted to ask something?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, can you please suggest us some of the green skills which we as students can inherit or develop, which will have a huge impact on our climate?
Yeah. Anyone from the panel?
I didn't hear the question well. There was some.
She's asking: are there any green skills that will be beneficial for the students that they can practice and learn for a sound future?
Yeah, I mean, again, the green skill also has both, right? Soft skills and hard skills. Hard skills where you're talking about what kind of material you use, what kind of hardware you develop, or what kind of food you produce and eat, and so forth. Sustainable agriculture is one of this kind of, right? Those skills. So how to do organic farming, which is, organic farming doesn't mean that it is actually completely green. Green skills are completely different than the organic farming. So some of these things they can learn. Other one is the soft skills. In the soft skills, being aware of the cause and effect relationship of climate change, being aware of cause and effect relationship of any environmental related degradation or air pollution and so forth, and then the thinking of innovative solutions to the problem. And the problem could be the problem could be global, like climate change, but the impact would be local. There'll be heavy rainfall, low rainfall, or this or that and kind of stuff. High temperature, low temperature, and variety of different other type of complications. So the solutions have to be local, and it has to be innovative, and it has to be sustainable, right? And developing those skills, and there are places which people are following, like climate resilient living or climate adaptive methodology of community build living is already being practiced in some pockets. Students can go and live there and and learn those skills for themselves.
Yeah, there are several green skills that are there across the sectors and across the dimensions that we have been speaking about. Like, I mean, depends on the choice that you have, Chinmay. So if you are looking at a career, say in the textile industry, then you have to look at green skills within the textile industry, right? So there are, and then there are certain green skills that really cut across all the sectors also. For instance, green skills in the finance, the climate finance is something that cuts across every sector. So you can look at that. So there are, multiple ways to build on green skills, and there will be a compendium that will be shared with all the students who have attended this webinar on the green skills, and a white paper will be shared with all of you that can be a ready reference for you to take the decisions and move forward. May I request, who is admin? You can unmute yourself and ask your question. Okay, Srishti Datta, you can unmute yourself.
Good morning, ma'am, sir. I want to say that I want to add a point that if we just stop to use the plastic bags in India, I have seen that in local markets, people who are selling, actually, they are selling the fruits and vegetables in plastic bags. If we stop to use those plastic bags and just carry our paper or jute bags, then we can control more and more sustainable, and we can just stop we can just stop to make our environment dirty.
Yeah, very well said. Debadrita, you can unmute yourself.
Yes, ma'am. I had the question that, ma'am, earlier you spoke about companies such as Nestle or PepsiCo who might take sustainable measures to make their food items less junk. But in India, we actually see many street hawkers selling roadside food. I mean, they do not have that much resources, monetary resources, to actually buy the best quality products to make their food items very much healthy. So, ma'am, and if their junk food is banned, so that would have a great effect on the economy, because many people like that would be jobless. So, ma'am, what's the solution in this?
I would request anyone from the panel to take an attempt, else I will be happy to answer.
I'll just quickly say, Debadrita, I think that's again a valid question.
And
I don't have a
question, Debadrita. I really love your question.
Yeah, I don't, you posed a question where I don't have an answer. The point is, all I will say is, how do we balance the human needs versus the sustainability needs and the nature's needs? Because any sustainability measure, any sustainability action, any greening action should keep the people's needs and the people's well-being at the heart of it, and especially the common people, especially those who are at the bottom of the pyramid. Unless we keep that at the heart of our thinking process and action process, it is not the right way to do it. So that's all I can say. Thank you.
Okay, I would like to add to that, Venki. So, Debadrita, when you talk about the street hawkers, so first of all, you have to understand they are not using preservatives, because preservatives are not easy to procure, and that's an additional cost for a street hawker, right? So these are this is junk, but it is not having preservative. So junk plus preservative makes it even more junk. So when a PepsiCo or a Nestle would try to do that, then that becomes a little more. Just think about it, the shelf life of everything. Can you take a slice of potato, pack it in a plastic bag, and keep on selling that for next 1 year? You cannot do that, right? The only way you're able to do that, because you have processed it in a certain manner and you have put in preservatives so that it lasts for 1 year. And the rule of nature is simple. In nature, one species eats the other species. You have seen the tiger will not hunt a deer and then wait for 1 year and after that come and eat it. It doesn't happen like that. So there is a way to consume, and the fresh, what I'm trying to actually bring to your notice is the fact that the street hawker is also producing junk, but that junk is fresher at least. and it was also adding to the economy of the country. So of course, yes, so we have to promote that. And in a way, if you can help that street hawker procure better resources, procure better, say, fresh water, those things, I think as a community we can support. So that is what I would like to suggest.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Any other question? Srishti Datta? Is it Srishti Datta? TIG? tipsgaria.in. I don't know, I just see the email ID. Else, I think we can take the question.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, one thing which I wanted to tell you is that the companies also produce this amount of waste, right, ma'am? So there'll be like biodegradable waste and non-biodegradable waste. Right. So like the biodegradable waste, whatever the company is producing on large scale, that can be degraded, and above that a plant can be planted, right? It serves as a good natural fertilizer as well, because it's biodegradable and it has a lot of nutrients in it. And the non-biodegradable, whatever is there, like for example, say plastic or any other things which are not biodegradable, we can reuse it and make something out of it, right? Like if the company is constructing any wall or something like that, so there are some procedures which we can do, and which we can build a plastic wall, or to make something creative, to build a table out of it, which is very rigid and which is also helpful. So we can reuse the non-biodegradable things. So it can also contribute to the climate, and it can reduce the waste, and we can reuse, and that will be a creative idea that we can just make it a, like we can make it a good trend altogether. So
yeah,
that was my...
Yeah, that's a good point, Chinmay, and that is happening as well. And that is happening, I mean, at the level of some very big organizations, you know, like Wholesome and all, they are actually clearing the waste through their bubble barrier technology, and procuring that plastic waste from rivers and lakes and ponds, and reusing that for their cement manufacturing purposes, right? So similarly, there are other ways also by which the plastic is getting recycled and reused in a different way. The problem with plastics generally comes in the fact of segregation, where it doesn't happen adequately. So maybe at the individual level, so if you all become the ambassadors at your home and at your community, then at least you can prevent that from happening. But I think we are really, done with the time. We are exceeded 1.5 hours. So thank you so much to our panelists. I think 2 of them have already left. And thank you so much, students, for your very engaged and lovely participation, great questions. Thank you so much, everyone.